I write a bunch of scenes, or a piece of dialogue hits me, and you have all this stuff all over the place, and you begin to make note cards or use WritersRoom Pro in order to structure your story properly, digitally, and with the advantage of being able to work with a writing partner and a staff and a writer's room and all that sort of stuff. I use it. It's great. By the way, I'm joking a little bit right now, making you very uncomfortable.
A little bit.
But the truth is, especially in the pandemic era, it has enabled me and my writing partner Lisa Klink to work virtually as if we were in the same room when we couldn't be together for in the same physical spot for, I don't know, a couple of years or so. And in a way, our productivity actually increased because of it. But I'm going off on a tangent.
Interesting.
We'll talk
But thank
about
you.
that later.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's been amazing. Thank you for that. Anyway. So with a graphic novel, you're able to work the same way that I think you work when you're working on a movie, which is you're kind of shaping it on all ends holistically. Whereas with a television show, you're barreling forward. You got to feed the beast. So many times you're writing a script in a few days from the beginning to the end, and you're hoping that your knowledge of craft and your instincts and your creativity are going to shape it into something that is going to be entertaining and hit the beats and work. Same sort of thing with writing comic books, where you're writing a 22-page story in a month, and you're hoping that this thing is going to set up and everything that you're going to need 4 months from now when you're writing the conclusion of it, and there's no opportunity to go back and touch on this thing over here. So Bob Gale, the co-creator of Back to the Future, whom I recruited to write the first story arc of Batman No Man's Land. So I have very strong memories. Hi, Bob. Very strong memories of walking in Central Park with Bob, and Bob saying, I've written film, I've written movies, written TV, all this novels, whatever he's written, and comic books are the hardest medium to write for. That if you can write for comics, you can write for anything else, because it's essentially like writing a storyboard. It's like writing a film, but you stop it in the storyboard phase. And that gets into other areas of craft also, because in comics, you need to be able to represent an entire scene sometimes, or an entire emotion, or what would in film be a group of shots, or a group of a sequence. Let's call it a sequence. You need to be able to represent that in a single image. So you need to find the high point of the plot and the characters and what I call the emotional arc and all this stuff that you're keeping in your head craft-wise at the same time. You need to be able to distill all of that into one image that's inside a box. That's our frame, but it's not that you have, how many is it? 22 frames a second, 32 frames a second?
24.
What is it, 24?
Yeah.
Okay. Time is very elastic in comics. You could spend an entire page portraying a second or portraying the lifetime of a person. I do a workshop called the Super Storytelling Workshop or Seminar. And what I do is I meet with folks in corporate America or any corporate setting, and I show them how to do clear, concise, and creative ideation using comics. And I do a 4-panel comic strip, which is a different sort of craft than doing graphic novels and comic books.
Right.
Obviously related, but first cousin. And I find that by enforcing the rules of doing a 4-panel comic strip on people who are, buttoned up corporate types, it's the best way to get them to drill down, to distill their ideas into the essence of what they're trying to say, so that they can then build it out. Because what happens is I find, and this is true of people who work in any vertical, in any industry. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a bricklayer, a sanitation worker, or a writer. You always have a ton of ideas floating around in your head. And sometimes you got to get out of your own way. How do you get out of your own way? How do you find the essence of what you're trying to say so that it doesn't get lost in the sea of all these other fine, colors? It's like if nowadays on computers, we have an infinite rainbow of colors that we can choose from when we're coloring comics.
16 million colors.
Right. It's like, well, what do I do with that? Well, I'm fortunate that in the 90s, I started analog and I ended not ended, but segued from that into the next part of my career with digital. So when I was an intern at DC Comics, which is how I began there, one of the things that I did was coloring comics. And we used to take Dr. Martin's dyes and photocopies of the artwork, reduced down photocopies of the artwork. And we used to paint, literally hand paint the black and white artwork. And then we would take an acetate sheet and lay it over it. And we used to label the colors according to their RGB or CMYK makeup. And so I have a great talent. It's wonderful. It kills at dinner parties where I can look at any color and tell you what color it is. Like I'm looking at your shirt right now and I'm thinking that's 40%, no, probably 60% magenta, 40% blue. I put in 15% yellow and maybe a 10K. And that's the color. And the only
that
reason—
is your superpower.
That is my superpower, right. How do you like that, ladies? Hi, Amy. That's a callback to my wife. I know it was a long time ago, but there you go. Anyway, in coloring that way, I learned how to work with a limited palette. And that very much can be applied to writing as well. That if you learn to write with a limited palette or create with a limited palette, you learn focus. And focus is the hardest thing for us to pull in any kind of industry. And by using a limited palette of the 4 panels that has a specific space for the image and a very limited number of letters or words that you can put in for the dialogue or the narration, Stanley used to say 25 words. That's what you got space for. Any more than that, you're overdoing it. So can we bring across an idea in 4 panels that represent the setup and the second stage and the third stage and the fourth stage? I won't get into the weeds on that right now. Go to superstorytelling.com and you can learn more about it. Can you then take your idea and get that essence of it, and then from there, you can build it out into whatever you want. It can be a film, it can be an audio something, it can be a book, a novel, an advertising campaign, and anybody can do this. Because if you can draw a stick figure and you can write words on a page and you can tell a story, you can do comics. And you see kids doing this all the time. So why do adults get so tight and uptight about it? We have to be able to get back to the essence of that kind of storytelling. And I think that gets back to something that you were saying before, when it comes to film and television and how it engages you or you're more immersed in it than comics. Well, I think with any medium, if you have managed to find your central story first and know definitively where it's going, whether you're anthologizing it or you're writing the beginning, middle, and end all over the place, like in films, or however you're crafting it, it will succeed.
Well, I had Saul Blinkoff, who's an animator, who I know you know, but we were talking about also that sort of if you can write in a with limitations, then it's incredibly difficult. We were talking in the context of preschool. So, when you're writing for preschool, there's all the box is kind of small about where you can get your drama from. So it's kind of a similar thing, right? It's like the equivalent of 25 words.
Yeah. And when I'm showing people, we use the professional tools for making comics, the same kind of non-repro blue pencil, and I have a templated board with lines that disappear when you photocopy them or scan them. And for the lettering, and there's a very specific craft to putting the lettering inside the balloons. They're not bubbles, folks. They're balloons. So there's a very specific way of doing that. You have to use all capital letters, and you have to make sure to use punctuation. And there's a way to show. The first question that always comes up is, well, what happens if more than one person is speaking at a time? And I have my instruction sheets. I anticipate that question. Here's how you do it, and there are ways to get it done. But the paper looks like the same paper you got in first grade. Remember when you were learning how to write for the first time, and you had a top line for the top of the letter and a bottom line for the bottom letter, and you had a dotted line in the middle for a letter like an E that has a little chick in the middle. And it's the same thing in comics. So even you're working within a limited palette, even writing your words, literally physically writing your words. So everything about comics is taking all of the multimedia craft and distilling it to its essence. And that's why I think Bob Gale said, if you can do comics, you can do anything.